So if we can have everyone come up, and one of our goals with this is to have discussions. So this is, I hope we can do that now.
So this is something of an interactive session.
Yes,
and we're hoping that the audience will chime in with questions and that our distinguished panel can answer those questions or at least engage in some good conversation.
Otherwise, we'll start asking you questions.
Right.
I just want to compliment you and the group and what we've done in pulling this together. I think that's really outstanding. Get the people involved in trying to understand not only our culture, but their culture, and in the process of doing that, you're preserving it. And one of the things that's so easy to do is to lose that culture. We're seeing that now with the third, fourth, fifth generation, that gets further apart. I'm a part of the Polish community, so I've seen that happen only a century prior. I mean, anything you can do with your electronic tools that you have to be able to preserve those little events that take place in your homes and so forth. And then not only take them, but have a place to preserve them. That's really going to be important as time goes on. The activities that you share and exchanging information ideas is really great, because only through this understanding of uniquenesses that each of us have in our own cultures is important to share so we understand it. So we don't run into all these conflicts. They're not necessarily conflicts, they're just differences. They don't fit the same standard that other people are familiar with.
I just want to respond to that, and thank you for that. I think that is certainly our goal. That was part of our goal in doing this. And part of speaking for our director here, but I think that part of that fear that I talked about earlier, issue of trust, is I think that the members of the Hmong community who I have talked to have said, we agree that that needs to be done. But are they going to understand us? You know, even after they see this, are they going to value this as much as we do? And so we try to assure them that that is the point where we feel the story needs to be told so that there is more understanding. But of course, you know, they still have this fear that that might not happen. And so I try to tell them, because I'll be honest with you, there were some articles that were written after hearing about this, and they said, well, of course they need to know the Hmong, sure, it's okay to know the Hmong culture, but they still need to know more about American culture. They need to change. So it's that sort of talk, I think, that they're very skeptical about. But we try to tell them, you can't change everybody. You can't educate everybody, but we can try to reach out to as many people as we can.
But isn't that really the benefit of what you're trying to do? Although it's a snapshot, short period of time, if there's some way to describe this change that takes place over multiple generations, it's not a problem issue. It's the same thing that happens with every new generation when or not generation, but culture that came to this country. They had their little cells and their little groups, but they actually integrated over a period of a couple generations. And most people don't understand that. They sort of here and now. And that's what they see. There's a difference between my culture and this other culture out here, Hmong or whatever it is. It's a difference.
Did you grow up here?
I grew up here, went to school here, and then left for 35 years, retired, and came back.
So your parents were here also?
Yes, I lived or visited the grandma on the farm. We could only speak Polish, and I observed and watched that. Very similar years, only they went through it, a generation or two at the same time.
And the comment that I wanted to make was that I can identify with this as well because I'm a second generation Italian and grew up in a very Italian town in the east where we had our parents and our grandparents were from the old country. And so we were that next generation over. We did not have the same, we had a similarity in religion, which really did build a bridge for us. It wasn't necessarily a bridge that was here for the Hmong at that time. So that's one of my observations, is that we had that common religious background that did tie the Polish. I grew up with Polish, Italian, and Polish, Italian, Irish Catholics. So our diversity was that. Which church did you go to? But the church was the same church, basically.
So that was the bridge.
That's right. That was the bridge that we had as a church.
Often German-speaking grandparents at the point. My father never learned, even though German was the language of his household, and we had 7 siblings, none of those people, my aunts and uncles, ever spoke German. And then I came along in the 3rd generation, and wanted to learn the language as a foreign language of the parents. So you're probably a little too early for that, but the next generation wanted to kind of neighbor that and want to study mine, and they help perpetuate culture and curiosity. I know from my own grandparents, whom I did not ever meet, I know that to my father, they were discouraged. They spoke German at home, but kids could answer English, or okay, the kids learned English in school. They actually, these were different times, World War II. So it was not cool to be speaking German. So that's the whole political backdrop to that too. It's just not comparable.
I actually had a question for you, because you mentioned the issue of language and how much the ability to speak and use the language constitutes the Hmongness or not. And coming from a different country where we had similar discussions, and I was involved in a similar research project 20 years ago where no, German is the main culture, you have to learn German, but here, I think the pressure is much greater that you have to speak English only. And how much do you think is preserving language actually essential or not? Because we see with some of the Native Americans, they find that as an essential part in preserving their culture, their culture.
Well, I'm not going to answer this one directly. My thought, first thought is this. It is pretty powerful, isn't it? This pressure, or for lack of a better word, is to speak English and see English as the language of, shall I say, power. Because, let me just, and I say it that way, it's strong. I think about my niece, not my niece, actually one of my youngest cousins, when I was going to college, she wasn't going to school yet. She had one older brother who was in school. Her mom, was one of those. She spoke. Their mom spoke Hmong to them all the time, and they grew up mostly with our grandmother. And I remember coming back home from college and speaking to her, and I just loved hearing her speak Hmong because her mom was just so beautiful and deep for her age. Again, she wasn't even school age yet. And so I would come home and I would speak to her in Hmong and just want to hear her speak. And then she would do that. The year she went to kindergarten, I came back, and I remember it was during a holiday or something, and I came back to talk to her, and she refused to speak to me in Hmong, almost immediately. And she refused to speak to me in Hmong. I said, "Oh, speak to me in Hmong, speak to me in Hmong." And she goes, "I don't understand." And she says this in English, and she just refused to speak it. So somewhere, even in kindergarten, someone told her, she received some sort of message that it was not, that Hmong was not a language of power.
You see that?
I just wanted to respond to that, and I recently did a presentation for Professor Jennings, one of our classes, and talking about identity. I go into talking about relearning the language to learn the culture, because even at my age, I'm a 1.5 generation. I came here as a toddler, and so I speak the language fluently, and I can read and write it, but I don't understand enough of the culture. And so going back into learning the culture, I relearned the language with it, because to preserve the culture, you have to really understand the language to understand some of the religious or cultural ceremonies. And so that's very important. So that was part of the identity presentation I did for Tori, and I realized that after I did while I was, creating my presentation.
I was just going to say too that I sing, and I've always wanted to be able to learn the Hmong songs and their chants, but I could never learn it. The reason why was because of what Song just mentioned. I don't have knowledge of that deeper, more sophisticated language. So it's hard for me. I mean, my mom, I can speak it fluently, but it's quite basic.
For whatever it's worth, I'm speaking as a 9-year-old now, coming from Germany. 6 years after the Second World War, we moved to a German farming community in northeast Iowa. All my father's relatives spoke German. But being 9 years old, I wanted to be American. And we always spoke the dialect, the German dialect at home, in the house. Not the High German, but the dialects. I don't know if any of you know what it's like. When I went to school, I eventually got to a point where, because I was so harassed, being called Nazi and all kinds of things, I got to the point where I hated being German. They didn't want to speak my German anyway. And, you know, I regret that now. I can barely manage the German anymore. But as far as the culture, I don't know if I can identify very much with that. We do things, German traditions, baking, and many years ago, when the immigrants first came, they had the German clubs reserved to Germans. In the 1800s, the Norwegians had clubs, and in fact, it was the sons of Norway that still meets Scandinavians. My wife and I can go to that. And those are all ways to kind of preserve the culture, even though none of us are the same speak Norwegian. That's my experience. Circumstances were very different. I know.
That's a story to be told. I appreciate that.
I have in other communities worked with ethnically different groups, the African Americans in St. Louis, the Mexican Americans in Colorado, and the refugee community down in Texas on the border, Salvadorans, Guatemalans. And when I came to Stevens Point in 2002, I was struck very much by the very whiteness of the community. I was used to being in a much more integrated setting. And I saw it probably pitifully, sought ways to interact with the Hmong community, but I didn't know how to do that. Are there forums where Hmong Americans can interact and intersect other than the market on Saturday? That's always a good place. But that's the only place I could find to interact. I went to the festival. It was a big Hmong festival down at the Veterans Park. And I was the only non-Hmong person. And it was kind of a strange experience. I didn't have anyone with me, so I was alone. And I walked through, but I also didn't know how to relate or how to interact. And I still keep looking for ways to intersect it. Are there forums this is a wonderful experience, but are there other settings, if you don't work in a school, let's say, where there are Hmong students, but if you don't have any contact, are there ways to connect with the Hmong community?
I just want to say one thing. That's such an interesting set of comments, and two things come to mind. Is it often happens in churches, and it happens on the soccer field. So if you play soccer, but I don't know. But I mean, that's such an interesting idea. And one of the things that's happening is, what are spin-offs from this? This is a starting place to have other conversations and do other things. So, I mean, are there?
Well, there are community gardens. I'm not sure if the current owner is still offering to offer his property for the Hmong community this year, but there's Guardian, and there's also the Hmong Association of Portage County, which I'm a part of. And if you have any questions, certainly, contact the organization. We're always, open to new members or just people who want to get involved with the Hmong community. The student organizations at the schools, at the university, even at the high school level. And so there's a lot of different venues to get involved, but I don't think there are any specific forums local that I can, point you to, but I'll definitely reach out to the Hmong Association or to the HASIAC, the student organization at the university.
It just sounds like something that could be created. That's a great idea.
I've been a big sister with Big Brothers Big Sisters for 10 years, and AMZ, we got together when she was 7. And talk about the trust. She and I had an immediate trust, but the trust with her parents were a little different. Her mother tended to speak Hmong every time I was there for the first year or so. I mean, she'd speak a little English, and it hurt me because I thought they were talking about me behind my back. But I found out differently. But I think Pam didn't really learn the Hmong language until she was 15 or 16, and she still doesn't know it very well at all. But it's been quite the experience because I've been to the celebrations, I've been to their home, she's been to our home. My husband and I have taken her to basketball games. We've infused her into our culture, but they also opened up and infused myself into their culture as well. I mean, her mother's made us egg rolls, and I've had her over for Christmas when we've done all the cookies and all that. But as far as what you were asking about with Big Brothers Big Sisters, because I am on the board as well, we have a mentoring program for people that would like to mentor some of these littles, and we have a lot of littles that are looking, and most of the littles are Hmongs, where you would spend maybe an hour a week at school and you would learn a lot about the culture from them. Plus, the Hmong mothers seem to want older bigs like myself, or they don't want someone that's 21 or 25, they want someone 40, 50 and older to be with that child. And it's just been a wonderful experience how I've learned the culture. Unfortunately, I haven't learned much of the language because Pam never really, none of the kids really got involved. It's just wonderful.
Currently at school, I'm here for requirement of the class. And as I was going through, I found your program here, Finding the Middle Way. And you brought up the subject of religion before, and usually the middle way is associated with Buddhism. I was kind of wondering how you came up with the title.
There's one of the books that I read as a graduate student that had a significant impact on me is The Middle Ground by Richard White. He's an environmental historian. And The Middle Ground is about contact between French explorers and the Iroquois during the 17th century. And the middle ground was a way for White to describe this negotiated space where neither side had power. Because early on in contact, white people didn't have power. And in fact, they had less power. And so both sides were negotiating, both sides were trying to take something out of the relationship, but neither side had power over the other. So I became deeply interested in this concept as a framing device to look at other things. We were drawing upon that when we thought about the idea. And then also how the middle way, or finding the middle way, describes this space of being both Hmong, being both American, and all of these things that have to be negotiated in this life for these people.
And that reminds me, one term I forgot to mention that I wanted to bring up earlier that was this idea along which Tori mentioned, finding a way. She mentions a lot negotiation, this need to negotiate. So that requires a game, and in Hmong we would say equity or self-equity. So to let go of some of the power. So to be able to build trust, we often talked about this in our conversation, to build this trust, to get rid of some of this fear, there had to be a way to zufuki, let go of some of the power on both